Ron DeSantis won the governorship of Florida in 2018 by very narrowly defeating Andrew Gillum. Less than 0.5% separated the two men, which in my mind was even then pointing to Republican peril in the upcoming 2020 election. Meanwhile, DeSantis seemed to be doing quite well for himself in the early part of his tenure by adopting some center-left positions that endeared him to a number of Democrats. He ended the opposition to medical marijuana, and he pardoned the Groveland Four, referring to 4 black teens falsely accused of rape in 1949. His approval ratings were pretty high, but then came 2020, and with it the start of the pandemic, and he chose to respond to it in much the same way as Trump, which has not worked out nearly as well. Instead of using former Governor Scott's put on the hat and take center stage leadership role, he followed the hands-off, let somebody else do it Trump method, letting local governments set patchwork rules. And like Trump, he was reluctant to issue shutdown orders, and like Trump, he wanted to reopen up as soon as possible. Then he compounded his problem by bragging about how things were going, not realizing Florida was about to become one of the worst states in regard to infections. So basically, at the moment, he isn't looking very strong. I understand he has 2024 presidential ambitions, but given what has been going on, perhaps he should be more concerned about first winning re-election to his governorship in 2022. Indeed, the astrology, albeit without a birth time and therefore necessarily limited, still shows cause for worry. His sun is being directly opposed by a Neptune that squares it at birth and will continue to oppose it right through until 2022. So that even in November of that year, when the voters cast their judgment, it's not really far enough away from the opposition to make it safe. During this year, he has Jupiter and Saturn squaring his Mars, which is an added indicator showing why things in 2020 aren't going so well. But the problem is that when these two planets exit to Aquarius in December, Pluto is just moving in for a 2-year square to that Mars, which will still be fully in play in 2022 when voting in Florida is happening. And to complete the outer planet trifecta, Uranus is currently squaring Venus and will do so until next spring. Another indication of a rough 2020, but then after that it locks into an opposition to itself, and this will carry it all the way into 2022 as well. The moon is somewhere between 15 degrees Aquarius and right at the very end of the sign, meaning it could easily be drawn into this Uranus pressure over the next couple of years as well. This guy is very chummy with Trump, and on top of shamelessly campaigning for the job, advertising that he was very in sync with the president, and I have a feeling it may just turn out badly for him in the long term. When people see death and destruction and they can point to a governor who clearly made some avoidable errors in this respect, you can bet they aren't going to be happy. Notice his sun is tightly squared to Trump's sun and moon. My interpretation of that is sooner or later they will either hurt each other or one will hurt the other. Perhaps Trump helped him get elected, and to be honest, I'm even skeptical of that. But following Trump's lead on coronavirus, whether from loyalty or personal belief, will almost certainly turn out to be a terrible idea. Another indicator of trouble with Trump is where that Mars is placed, right near Trump's Venus and Saturn. That alone will guarantee a continued hellish 2020, and is a second factor promising his alliance with Trump will probably prove fatal in the long term. Without a birth time, this has to be considered speculative, but I'm not optimistic about DeSantis in the long term. My sense is this guy may be destroying his future through gross mismanagement of the coronavirus pandemic. This kind of thing isn't something voters easily forget, and you can bet the ones that do will be reminded by his future opponents. So with that in mind, and with enough planet hits to justify my feeling, I'm going to say that he will not be a viable presidential candidate in 2024, and since he won in 2018 by a very narrow margin when he had a pretty good planet situation, I'm guessing that in the 2022 Florida election, when the planets are tougher, he is likely to lose.